Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Sleep Detective podcast, where good sleep, health, and longevity are inevitable. Today, I want to talk all about parasites because a quarter of my clients actually have a parasite. And the ones who do tend to be, have more symptoms. They tend to take a little bit longer to get better, but it doesn't mean that they can't get better. So, this is relevant to me too because I also had a parasite. And I think I got my parasite from traveling in Nepal and India 13 years before I ever developed insomnia. So when I was in Nepal, I was about to go trekking to Annapurna Base Camp, and I got super sick. I figured it was Giardia, and I was resistant to taking antibiotics. I've definitely been always been a more natural kind of anti-medication person, and so I didn't take antibiotics. So after, lying on the floor of the bathroom for 24 hours and feeling awful, I recovered for a couple of days and then went on this trek. And it was a 10-day trek. It was absolutely amazing, but I didn't feel great the whole time. It's weird. Like I would feel great one day, and then the next day I would just have no energy and be having all these gross burps. And then the next day I'd be fine. And then a day of not feeling good. So when I got back from the trek, I decided to get on antibiotics. And so I thought that that would be the end of it, right? Parasite gone. Well, turns out that probably wasn't the case. And I can see that after that trip is when things started changing in my body. And I thought it was because I had turned, I was in my 30s. And so I wasn't feeling as great as I was in my 20s. I definitely didn't have the same energy. I gained a little bit of weight, and no matter what I tried to do, it was really hard to lose it, which wasn't the case before. And so I can see how that is when my issues started, but they were very minor at first, and I was still sleeping just fine. So it wasn't until late pregnancy that I started not sleeping well, and that didn't go away even after my son was born. And so, it took me a couple years of trying all these things, and finally I learned about doing this lab testing, and I decided to become certified in the lab testing. So I took all the tests. I found out that I had a parasite. And also, when I looked at my cortisol levels in the middle of the night were so high, so much higher than the rest of the day, likely from that parasite. So, figuring that out, that was definitely one piece of the puzzle for me. So, if you aren't sleeping, this is definitely something that you want to be looking into. Now, it's not the entire piece of the puzzle. I also had hormone imbalance, I had uranium and copper toxicity, I was sensitive to gluten and I didn't know it. I had a lot of other things going on, some of them actually from the parasite. So, I want to get into this in detail here so that you can understand, more about if parasites are affecting your sleep and what they are, how you get them, how to test for them, and then what to do about them. So I'm going to tell you all that I can. So, what is a parasite? I mean, it is an organism that depends on a host to survive. So, once these things, when they leave your body, they aren't able to survive on their own. Now, there are other pathogens that also affect sleep, things like, kind of bad bacteria, there's yeast like candida. So, a parasite is a type of pathogen. And where you get them is usually from contaminated food and water. So it makes sense that you can get them in third world countries where, things aren't as sanitary as we're used to in first world countries, and our gut and immune system aren't strong enough to fight those things off. But you can also get them in the United States, in Europe. And so, I think I got mine in Asia, but I don't know that for sure. I could have gotten it anywhere. And actually, there's a parasite called Giardia that is all over the United States. Supposedly, almost every single body of water, even high in the mountains, is contaminated with it. So that might be one you've heard of. The parasite I actually tested positive for is called Blastocystis hominis, or blasto for short. And I've seen this one more than even Giardia in my clients. I've only seen Giardia a couple times. I've definitely seen Blasto in a fair number of clients, and it's a pretty gnarly one. Um, so, I also want to point out that we're exposed to parasites and pathogens often, right? And some people will say, well, we all have parasites, and maybe we do have some species of parasites that we have evolved to learn to live with. The parasites I'm talking about that are affecting sleep or that can affect sleep are, I would say, they're the more gnarly parasites. And so once they take hold, they can really take over, damage the gut, and thrive. And so, so really the goal is to have this healthy gut and healthy immune system in our gut that can fight off a pathogen if we are exposed to it. So let's talk about actually what this parasite does to your body. And I actually have a previous episode that I'll link to in the show notes that talks about the many ways a parasite causes insomnia. Because once a parasite takes hold, it does start damaging the gut. So that's going to, affect how well you're digesting food and absorbing the nutrients from food. It's going to lead to, when the gut is damaged, that is called leaky gut, where literally the cells of the gut wall are damaged and they let things leak through the gut wall into the bloodstream that shouldn't be there, like toxins and undigested food proteins. And that causes this low grade inflammation in your body all the time. And then when that happens, then you're more likely to react to different foods, especially wheat and dairy and soy and eggs and corn. Like those are the big ones. But, ideally, we wouldn't be reacting to most foods that are whole foods and properly prepared. So, yeah, so when your gut is damaged, then that can lead to these food sensitivities, which then causes this inflammation in your body. And these parasites also put an extra burden on your liver, especially in the middle of the night when your liver is most active as well. And so, yeah, so there are lots of ways that a parasite starts affecting your body and your health over time that can lead to sleep issues. And, when I see a parasite on a test, well, so people can be asymptomatic, right? Or maybe they just have poor sleep, but you can have bloating and nausea and diarrhea and things like that with parasites, especially when you first get them, like I did, like I was super sick. But a lot of times those things go away as your body starts fighting it. But if it can't fight it off and totally get rid of it, then you might not have symptoms that you realize are connected to the parasite because they aren't digestive symptoms. But, elevated levels of especially this blasto parasite can lead to IBS, it can lead to Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, even Hashimoto's. And a lot of times these parasites are feeding things like Candida, which is a type of yeast, and H. pylori. Like it's really common to see these other infections with parasites as well. So they just really, by damaging the gut, they really create this environment where other things can thrive as well. So, how does it affect sleep? This is the kicker, right? So, parasites and other pathogens are nocturnal. They are most active in the middle of the night, especially around 3 and 4 a.m. And, that's because they have their own circadian rhythm. So we are asleep at night, but nocturnal creatures are awake at night. So that is just their innate way that they work. And so the thing is, when they are active, that means that that's when they're eating. They're also pooping or excreting, and their poop has a lot of toxins in it. And then those toxins start circulating around, which causes a lot of inflammation. Whenever your body is inflamed, it releases cortisol because cortisol is an anti inflammatory hormone. So that is going to wake you up, right? Like cortisol gives us energy. It increases our heart rate and blood pressure and body temperature. It makes our mind race. It's a stress hormone. So that's great if that's happening in the middle of the day and we're running from a bear in the woods. It's not great when that's happening in the middle of the night. And then, as I mentioned, these toxins also put an extra burden on your liver. And so then it's not able to deal with all those toxins and the other toxins that it's trying to detoxify. And so that also causes more inflammation, causes your body to release more cortisol. So, especially if you're waking up around 3 or 4 and it takes you a long time to go back to sleep, it's likely because your body's releasing cortisol. And one of the top causes of this is having a pathogen like a parasite in your gut. Okay, so how do you know if you have a parasite? How do you test for this? So I use what is called the GI map or a gastrointestinal map. This is a stool test that's going to show about 75 things living in your gut. It's also looking at the good bacteria. It's looking at overall gut health by looking at digestion and immune function in your gut. But it's looking for pathogens, especially different kinds of parasites. And what's unique about this test, because there are many different stool tests out there. A lot of times, like a basic stool test you'll get from your doctor is looking at parasites and pathogens from through a microscope. So they're only looking at a few different things. Definitely not as many things as the GI map is looking at, and they're only going to, detect it if they actually see it. If they get a sample that has it and see it through the microscope. Another type of testing is antigen testing, where they're using, they're looking to see an immune reaction in your body against these parasites. Now, what the GI map does is it uses qPCR technology. So this is actually looking for their DNA. Now, there's no perfect test out there. Any of these tests can miss a parasite or other pathogens because it has to be in that stool sample. It has to be the right part of the stool sample. So it's definitely possible for things to be missed. But it's really hard for there to be false positives because if they see it through a microscope, if the antigens are there, and if they see the DNA, then we know that it's there. So there can't really be false positives for these tests. But from what I've learned is that looking for this DNA is the most effective and direct way to actually look for these parasites. And what's great about the GI map as well is that it is super sensitive. So if we talk about, detecting at the 10th level, so like at 10 cells per gram, that is how sensitive the GI map is. Other tests aren't testing until the 1,000th level or 5 to 10,000 level. So the GI map is just a lot more sensitive than a lot of other tests for these pathogens. And, sometimes the test will come back at, say, the 100th level. And so the lab won't flag it high. It won't flag it red. It will flag it yellow. But I still see that as, okay, you have a parasite. It's like this test is detecting a parasite. And a lot of times too, what I see in the GI map with people with parasites is that their immune function in the gut is really low. So, so they're not able to fight those pathogens off as much. So that means that they're not getting killed off as much and showing up in the stool. So there's likely a bigger infection than the test is suggesting. But if I see a parasite at any level, that is something, that's something that we're addressing because all my clients have sleep issues. So that is something relevant for sure. So what do you do if you have a parasite? Well, first of all, you want to test and find out. I don't recommend just going out and buying a parasite cleanse and having no idea if you have a parasite. A lot of times too, those parasite cleanse are just for a couple weeks, or even if you take a drug, an anti-parasitic is really an antibacterial drug. You take it for 10 to 14 days. Well, these parasites have a life cycle of at least 30 days. And so you really want to be taking something long enough to, so that the larva stages get into the adult stages and then you're able to kill it off as they mature. So, but what I really want to emphasize is that you want to be addressing gut health as a whole. So you don't just want to kill a parasite. That's not going to solve all the problems because we need to be making sure that you have enough good gut bacteria to help fight off that parasite in the future. If your gut wall is damaged, we want to be working on getting that healthier so that, again, so that you can fight these things off in the future and so that you can absorb the nutrients you need from food and digest food properly. A lot of my clients need digestive support. So, they aren't digesting fat or protein well. And so some enzymes can help with that. And because the parasite can lead to nutrient deficiencies over time, we also want to be supporting their body with those missing nutrients. And my approach is always we build the body up first before breaking it down. So that means we support it first by all the things that I just mentioned, before we actually get rid of anything. And that way the body's strong enough to be able to get rid of it. And it's also really crucial to be supporting the liver if you're doing any sort of parasite eradication. So, again, those parasites, those pathogens are putting an extra burden on the liver. So your liver probably already needs a lot of support if you've had a parasite for a while. And especially while you're working on getting rid of them, you want to be supporting your liver. So another key thing, when we talk about actually getting rid of the parasites, is you want to use what's called a biofilm buster. So parasites and these pathogens create what's called a biofilm, or protective shield around themselves. And it keeps things from killing them, including antibiotics or antiparasitic drugs, and even the herbs that I use. So you really want something to be breaking down that biofilm. You also want to take what's called a binder. So these are things like activated charcoal or bentonite clay or zeolite that will actually bind to those toxins from the parasite and get them out of the body safely. So that helps reduce the burden on your liver. And then I use herbs usually for at least 60 days to deal with the parasite itself. So those are the supplements that I tend to use. A lot of times these parasites, especially blasto, can take more than one round of this. So they can be notoriously hard to get rid of. Although I was able to get rid of my parasite in just one round. So I retested and it was gone the next time I retested. So the herbs are effective and I tend to prefer them, especially personally, and many of my clients do too, instead of taking a drug that really destroys everything, the good and the bad, and damages the gut. So I tend to, to go the more natural way, especially if it's just as effective and way less damaging. Now, I'm sure you want to know what supplements I recommend, how long to take them, when to take them. I can't legally tell you that. So, if I put all that information out there and you start taking these things and you get really sick and you want to sue me, then yeah, that is why I can't legally tell you things. And so when we work with our clients, we know that we get the whole picture. We know how strong their bodies are, and we really, some of our clients can just take everything full dose, no problem. Other people, like myself, are a lot more sensitive and have to take it really slow and add things really gradually, and maybe take a break and support their liver a little more before trying again. So it's just, I never know how any one person is going to react to these supplements. So we have to be really careful. And, I want to be supporting people through that process. So I don't want you to just start taking all these things and feel awful and be mad at me and tell me that it doesn't work. And legally, I can't do that anyway. So I'm not a doctor. I can't give medical advice, but I can't even give advice, to the public where I can with my clients. We have a contract um, where we agree that they are choosing to do these things and they can talk to their doctor about it and get a second opinion. So that is why I'm not telling you everything to do, exactly how to do it. I just can't responsibly do that. So I hope you understand. But I hope that this episode helps you understand more about what these parasites are and, how to test for them if you have one. This is definitely something that I'm looking for in my programs. So if you're looking to get to get to the bottom of your sleep issues for good, then you want to work one-on-one with us and figure this out so we can support you through that process. All right, everyone, thanks for listening, and I will talk to you next time.